Hi guys, welcome to 16-Bit Bench. Matt here. Game Gears, Game Gears, Game Gears. We got Game Gears coming out of our ears. I am up to my literal ears in Game Gears. It's crazy. I really love the Game Gear. I think it's a great handheld. I really enjoyed having one when I was a kid, and my love for the Game Gear is kind of what got me back into retro gaming. Problem is, they were built to a budget, and they have problems now. So the main problem that you'll find with a Game Gear is that it either doesn't power on, or when it powers on, it powers off again, or if you get it to stay on, you have to hold it at a weird angle to see the screen, and you can't, and the sound doesn't work, and you have to put cartridges in and out and in and out and in and out. And that is almost always down to the capacitors inside. So let's take a look inside this chap. I've already unscrewed it for speed's sake. You don't need any special tools except a 4.5mm game bit, which is holding that screw in there, and you have to take that out. So if we take a look inside, the components are in both halves of the shell. And on the battery side, you've got a power board and a sound board, and then on the screen side, you've got the main board and the screen. Game Gears come in broadly two types. There's dual ASICs, so two sort of ASICs here, or the single ASIC, and you'll see one big chip here. So the dual ASIC is the earlier model, and the single ASIC is the later model. Not a massive amount of difference between them. I think the single ASIC is preferred because it is like a later revision and it is a bit more stable. So the issue that we have is that all over the board in these little black packages are electrolytic capacitors that are extremely cheap and leak and fail. In fact, the 68 farad one right here is wet, so I know that's bad. And the really easy fix is to replace all of these capacitors on the main board and the sound board. The power board ones are usually better and do not necessarily need to be changed unless you have a power board problem. So let's figure out what's wrong with this Game Gear. So I've got the power supply here. Let's plug it in, see if it turns on. Okay, power supply in, power button on. We get a couple of lines on the screen. That's usually not a good sign. If there's lines on the screen, it might be that it's dead and it's not worth working on. But we can heat up the ribbon cable to see if we can resolve those lines. Other than that, came on once and then not again. Okay, and the other problem with this one is the front case just here is cracked. Someone's played it a little bit too hard. So what we're going to do is I'm going to recap this Game Gear. Probably going to replace the front plastic with another one because, like I said, I've got Game Gears coming out of my ears, and we'll see if we can resolve the lines on that LCD. And if we can't, well, there are other options. A replacement screen for a Game Gear is about £100. You replace the LCD with a modern replacement. It is massively better. It's actually, it's well worth the investment. It's probably not worth like a reseller, fitting them and selling them because the margins are so slim. But yeah, if you can something you can do yourself, then that is worth it. Other than that, just a general cleanup. Cool. So I know it came on, so I'm pretty sure the power board's fine, and the power problem is with the internal components. But to confirm that, what I can do is just unplug it from its existing rear shell. And here's one I prepared earlier from another Game Gear that I know is good. And we'll plug the power board in there. Yep, comes on once. You can see that. You can see the lines just there. on the upper half of the screen there's some lines right there. Okay, so this power board seems much more reliable than the one that's in that is existing one. So it may be that we need to replace those power board capacitors as well. That's a slightly harder job than replacing the board capacitors. There is a ground plane on this power board, which means that it sinks a lot of heat. So it's not easy to do with a standard soldering iron, and you may need to use a rework station or something to actually get those caps out, and that's usually when I get the best results. So yeah, so let's crack on with replacing the caps on this and seeing if we can get those lines to disappear on the screen. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before we really get anywhere is see if I can resolve that screen problem. If I can't, then it's a much more expensive fix, and I may pick another Game Gear. And like I said, the front case is cracked, so we're going to have to take the board out of it anyway. So it's held in by 8 screws, 6 little brass ones like this. Whoa, lost one. There he is. And then 2 big black ones either side of the cartridge connector, and they're there as sort of reinforcement and strain relief because the cartridge connector gets a lot of punishment over the life of the console. So out this guy comes, usually a little bit sticky. Did I miss one? Yes, I did. So there's 4 more screws. They hold in the light reflector on the back of the fluorescent tube. So you don't need to remove these 4 on the little plastic silver bit. Okay, there we go. This is the front of the Game Gear. We don't need that. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll remove the power board from this board, so we can just use that for testing without having to lug the whole thing around. And that's just held in by 2 screws. On some Game Gears you'll have a bit of so here you'll have a bit of adhesive tape. This one doesn't have it, and that just holds down these 2 battery terminals, but without that this guy will just pop up if you pull on the board and not the plastic. So we'll put that to one side and make sure you save the power button because it can get lost. So let's plug this chap in. So the only thing you need to be wary of with this board is the voltage driver for the carbon fluorescent tube is a high voltage circuit. So you'll see here there's a transformer. Let's not use that to point with. There's a transformer, there's a coil, and there's this high voltage capacitor, and then there's this electrolytic, and looks like a big power resistor there. And that is driving high current into the tube to light it up. So in this area there is high current electricity, so you just don't touch it. That would be advisable. There is a mod to remove the tube, replace it with a LED backlight. It's worthwhile because it saves a lot of battery life. Okay, so the screen's on. The brightness is pretty good for one of these things. Yeah, I'm just seeing these 3 black lines. Yeah, got rid of one. So what we're going to do is apply some heat in this area here. So you can see the way the LCD works is it's got 3 vertical drivers, 1, 2, 3. So if you get a line, what you'll usually find on a dying screen is you'll have a third of it will be dead. So if you lose the middle third, it means this driver is gone bad. And then I think the horizontal lines are driven like on a multiplex, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 traces that come off the ribbon cable and go to the horizontal driver, which is this chip here. And usually what we do is just apply some heat. So what, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching the soldering iron to the chip. I'm just hovering it over the chip at the moment, and I've already got rid of one line doing that. So that's number 2 gone. Now I'm just really lightly stroking that, and that's number 3. Okay, so A's come back. We'll try a little bit more heat. Clean the tip of this soldering iron, it's grim. Yeah, so all I'm doing is I'm trying not to physically contact the driver chip, if at all possible. There we go. And I think I'll just hover here for a while. Yeah, so if at all possible, avoid physical contact with the component, just hover the heat of the soldering iron over it. This iron I think is somewhere in the region of 300 degrees. If I had a variable solder station, which is really something I should get, then I would know exactly how hot it is. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll let that cool down and come back to it and see if the lines stay away. I actually see there's a slight difference in that 3rd quadrant here as well. You probably can't pick it up on camera. Just a slight difference in tone. Oh. Yeah, I tell you what, I've got it good. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. So like I said, what I'm going to do is let it cool down, and then we'll see how it is. So I'm just going to turn this off. So here we are about 20 minutes later. So I know the component's nice and cooled down. Let's just power it on one more time. You can see those 3 lines are now gone, and I'm pretty sure they'll permanently stay away, or at least for a few more years. So when we put a game in, it runs, it plays, but there's it's incredibly dull. That is brightness at full. So to my mind, that is about half as bright as it should be. You can't even see, the Batman title screen. You can just about see it there. So yeah, it's about half as bright as it needs to be. So that is the driver capacitors for the screen brightness need to be replaced, and all the other capacitors need to be replaced as well. There's quite significant ghosting. Now, as anyone who is aware of the Game Gear, the screen is terrible anyway, and replacing it with a modern replacement, like I said before, just is a completely different experience. So yeah, some of the ghosting is down to the bad screen, but also some of the ghosting is down to capacitors not driving the screen properly. So yeah, a capacitor replacement on this model would be ideal. So that's what we're going to do. But I think step 1 is to replace the broken front. You can see it's all cracked here. So I've got a bunch of these. What you could do is you could use, let's say, epoxy putty to repair this damage, and that may be something I do in the future. Like I put an epoxy putty in there, I shape it and sand it, and then colour it so it blends in, and that may be something I do. I've got a lot of Game Gears, and some of them are just going to become Raspberry Pis. Game Gear. I don't want to call them Game Gear Zeros because you can fit a Pi 3 in here, so you can have a fully featured portable emulation platform in a Game Gear case. There's enough space, and it will still run on batteries. You could actually use the sound and power boards from the existing Game Gears as well, which is cool. So yeah, that's a project for another day. That's a video for another day. Today we're just going to focus on getting this one up and going. I've replaced the front with one from another Game Gear that I had, one that someone had pretty much trashed. It's not the same. It has the flat glass. I think it's glass. No, it's plastic. But it has the flat front screen instead of the curved one. But other than that, it's exactly the same. It's not cracked. It's a bit dirty. It needs a clean up. Yeah, but that's a fine replacement. Yeah, it's a step. So we've fixed the screen, the lines on the screen, and we've replaced the case. So now the next step is to start the recap process. It's not that hard once you get into it. Yeah, I've probably done this about 10 or so times now. What we'll be replacing the capacitors with is not electrolytics. So the capacitors they put in here, and what most people usually do a recap with, is electrolytic capacitors because they're cheap and easy to get hold of. But what I have in my wonderful bag is I have a whole load of surface mount ceramic capacitors. So if you can see that's the little dots here. They're just the right pitch to fit between the pads on the board, so they work really well in that respect. They are more reliable than the electrolytics. They will last much longer, and as far as and they give you a load more space to work as well. You know, get all cramped in. So if you look at a Game Gear board, you can see it's covered with ceramic capacitors, little surface mount ceramic capacitors. They're little brown squares with solder blobs on each end. I can only assume the reason they didn't use surface mount ceramics for the electrolytics is because they either couldn't get the values that they needed, or ceramics were not as reliable or the values were not as specific as the electrolytics. Since this thing was designed, which is probably the early 90s, late 80s, the standard of components has come on leaps and bounds, and there's absolutely no problem in using ceramic surface mount. In fact, some of the values I need to replace with tantalums because I couldn't get them in ceramic. And the reason you don't use tantalums is because they're super expensive. But again, the price of those components is just pennies. So if you're an individual and you're fixing one Game Gear, you know, you may see a price of a few pence up to a few pounds or dollars between electrolytics and ceramics. But if you were making these at scale, if you had a factory and you were producing thousands of things like this a day, then yeah, it makes a lot more sense to penny pinch than it does if you're just fixing one. So yeah, ceramic capacitors is what we're going to use for the most part. Tantalums in some places. I don't think I need to use any electrolytics at all anymore. But if I run out or I can't find the right value, then I might need to. So that's the next step. I'm going to go capacitor by capacitor and just replace all the ones on the main board, and then all the ones on the sound board. The power board, I'm still not sure if I need to replace them. Okay, so I'm about halfway through. I thought I'd just show you guys a bit of the technique that we're using here to replace these caps. So it's easier if I do it on the iPhone. These are the packages. Where are we? These are the packages that we're removing. They're little black plastic cases around these circular electrolytics. So that's what one of the guys looks like without its case on. So if we look at the board, there's a couple I haven't done yet. That one, and that one. And here is one that I've removed. So that is that is a 10 farad capacitor, 16 volt capacitor that's there. So there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there that I've taken out. These are the guys I've replaced. So there's a 47, a 22 there, and then a 0.47 capacitors here. So as you can see, if we get close, my solder work is not, when compared to the other ceramics on the board, it's probably not as neat, and that's because these guys are put through a reflow oven, so they're glued to the board with a bit of adhesive, and then solder is either side of them, and they go through a hot oven, and that melts the solder, and then it flows onto the component. So I'm not doing that. That means I have to do one leg at a time, and that usually means that the capacitor doesn't sit flat on the board, because I've got to solder one side down, then the other, and you can edge it down over time if you go one side and then the other. So in order to put a capacitor here, I've removed the old capacitor, and then I've flowed some solder onto the pads. So now you can see the pads have fresh clean solder on them, and the next step is to place the component on. I can't do that and record with the iPhone at the same time, but yeah, so what we would do is we would take one of these out of this strip and place it in that position, and then just flow solder onto either end of it, so there's a good connection. And you notice the ceramics are not polarized. It doesn't matter which is plus and which is minus. The electrolytics that we're removing were polarized, so you can see there's a plus symbol here by one pad. That's where the positive side would go. Yeah, but the ceramics doesn't matter, so you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, so there's a few more to do, and then this one is done, and I'll show you the completed board in a minute. Okay, so I'm just working on the soundboard now, and I thought I'd show you an easy way to get these type of capacitors off. So if we take a look with the phone, you can see they're the kind of canister, surface mount canister capacitors, and all you really get exposed is a very tip of the trace of the leg of the capacitor. And if you look at this one, this is one I've already removed. You can see how much leg is actually inside the circle, so that's under the capacitor. So the way that the way I've found to get these off quite easily, and if I just put the phone down, is you get a pair of pliers and you hold the capacitor either side of its traces. So if the legs, say, are going north to south, we're going to rock it east to west. So I grab that in my pliers and I go east west like this. And what you'll be doing is moving the canister up on its legs and breaking the legs away inside the capacitor until boom, it comes off. And then if we come back with the phone and we have a look, what you can see is I've snapped the legs from inside the capacitor, leaving the traces intact. So if you just came with a pair of pliers and just ripped that off, you would rip the traces off the board. So by rocking it left to right, we fatigue the legs, and then the legs snap. So that makes it much easier to get these guys off. I've finished recapping all the boards, and when I went to reconnect the power board to the Game Gear, I could see that not only had the lines that I'd fixed reappeared, but there's loads more lines here. So initially the problem with the lines really was an indicator that this chip here on the side, the horizontal sort of driver chip, is failing. Yeah, so you know what I said about don't touch it with the soldering iron initially. Yeah, so and we floated over and we kind of got rid of those 3 lines that we had. But yeah, during the recap, I guess I put pressure on the board or something, and it moved this chip ever so slightly, and now it's kind of dead. Yeah, no amount of coaxing and stroking is gonna get rid of these lines on this screen. So that's unfortunate. The Game Gear is recapped, so it is working. You know, if I put a game in there, it looks really good. So what I'm going to do is put this back into its case and label it up for a candidate for a McWill screen replacement. Like I said, it costs about £100 to put that screen in. Oh, nearly, nah. Yeah, so it costs about £100 to put a screen in. And that will solve this problem here. And because we've used surface mount capacitors through the rest of the device, I mean that's kind of solves the other problems that it may have as well. So yeah, and this is a pretty good candidate for screen upgrade. So yeah, sad I couldn't get that screen to work. So what I'm going to do now is just pull another one off the shelf, recap that, and I'll pick up when I've got that one together, and we'll go through it. So this is the second Game Gear I've picked off the shelf to recap. So let's take a look inside and I'll show you the work that I've done. Okay, we just take a video close up. So we've replaced all the electrolytics on the main board with these ceramics. See, most of them are up here. The 68 microfarad capacitor is actually a tantalum one. The rest are ceramics. And I've tested the function of the board and it's completely fine. And this one has a good screen, unlike the previous one. The power board, the capacitors they used on the power board are a good quality make, so they tend not to have failed. But you can, if you do have power problems, often replacing these might fix it. But it might also be that there's another problem. There's sometimes a problem with this component. I'm not sure what it is in this coil here. These might have failed. And these power boards are relatively cheap to source off eBay anyway. So usually, you know, it's not worth trying to fix it. Here's the soundboard. You notice on the soundboard I've put electrolytics instead of ceramics. Now this soundboard is quite interesting. In fact, this whole Game Gear is quite interesting. This is a Japanese first revision, so this isn't the version that we got in Europe. It's a different model number on the back. It is a HG3210. It's actually an earlier model. There's a couple of differences inside from what you might see in the typical European Game Gear. This shield here is much smaller. On a standard European Game Gear or a later revision, there's a bit of shielding that comes out over the soundboard. And then the soundboard is slightly different. There's an IC missing from the soundboard that they obviously added later. And that might be part of what I'm hearing a problem with the soundboard about. So if I just power it on, when we're at full volume, there is an audible, if you can hear that, there's an audible buzz. It's kind of reliant on if you're near or touching sort of the area where the soundboard is. So yeah, I originally did try ceramics in this area, and the buzz was just much worse with ceramics, and so I swapped it out for electrolytics. Electrolytics are a little bit better at noise handling. Their response is a bit better. But yeah, I think the noise on this board is because it is a very early revision, and it only does happen at maximum volume as well. But it is an early revision, and it is missing a chip. So if I put a picture now of a Neurovision soundboard, and then I put a picture of this board, what you'll see is the difference in the layout and how the newer board is more crowded, has that big 6-pin chip on it going to the audio outputs. So yeah, other than that, this is a successful recap of the Game Gear. This Game Gear is in fully functioning order, so I will put it all back together. So there's two more kind of things I want to cover with Game Gears that we'll do in upcoming videos. One is the screen replacement. That is a LCD screen that's available from a guy in Germany that is typically called the McWill replacement, because that was the guy's username on the Atari Age forums. But I think his name's actually Marco. But yeah, that's widely available now direct from him, but also in shops all over the world. Kind of retro parts and stuff. You can buy McWill screen replacements. So one of the videos I'm going to do coming up is how to install that. It is a lot harder than just doing a recap. Takes a couple of hours sometimes. And then the other thing I want to do with Game Gears is a Raspberry Pi. So as I mentioned at the top of the video, you could easily fit a Raspberry Pi 3 inside this case with plenty of room for extra buttons. So what I'm thinking of doing is adding 2 face buttons here, and then two triggers up here in the top front, sort of this area, and maybe some rear buttons as well, and some capacitive touch sensors probably as well for bringing up menus and stuff. And then you'll have your typical USB ports and power ports and stuff as well. I'm kind of hoping to retain the use of the soundboard and the power board to drive the Pi, and that means that the 6 AAA batteries will still work as well. So that's part of one of the things I'm planning on doing with Game Gears. But yeah, if you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. I'd like to see a comment if you're a Game Gear fan, or you've had trouble, or you do this differently. Like I said, I have done Game Gears in the past that use electrolytics. Using the ceramics, that's something new that I've started doing in the last few weeks. Yeah, so I want to thank you for watching. Find us on Twitter and Facebook if you're interested, and we'll see you next time.